With every NBA trade deadline comes winners and of course comes losers. Let's talk about what teams I think are coming out of this trade deadline better and which teams I think are coming out worse. First, we'll go to the Utah Jazz as my first winner. I think this is a big win for them, getting Jaren Jackson Jr., the Defensive Player of the Year, the two-time All-Star, someone that I think fits really well into their system. And all they had to give up was a few role players and some picks that they really just don't care about. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. fits really well in Utah, and I think he's going to thrive alongside Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler when they do start playing some meaningful basketball. I don't think it's going to come this year, but I think next year is where you can see the Utah Jazz start to contend. So they're going to be my first winner of the day. But then we'll go to a team that I kind of was crapping on the other day in one of my videos, but I'm going to go to the Washington Wizards because I wasn't really sure what path they were going down. But now that I look at it, they actually do have a decent roster, and they're probably going to have a top 5 pick in this year's draft. So when you put all those things together, you're going to have, in my opinion, 4 guys that have all-star caliber type of talent in Trae Young, Alex Sarr, Anthony Davis, and then one of the top 5 picks in this year's draft, who I think are all kind of those guys that could be all NBA players. But, you know, we don't know that yet. We don't know what pick the Washington Wizards have yet. But I think looking forward to the future, this was a good move for the Wizards. It's just not going to come this year because they only have 13 wins, I think, on the year. So I don't think anything's going to happen this year. But I think for the future, this was a good move for the Wizards. And Trae Young and Anthony Davis are definitely going to be some must-watch basketball. But next, let's go to the Atlanta Hawks, who I think have just been making good moves all year long. They picked up Jonathan Kuminga as well as Buddy Hield in a trade for Kristaps, who I'd never thought Kristaps fit well in Atlanta, and especially with this new young core they have, I really like the additions of Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield. I think they'll fit in well there, and I think Atlanta's got a solid team that could probably compete in the playoffs, if not this year, in the next few years. So they're my third winner of the day. And now let's go to the middle of the pack. These are teams that I don't think necessarily won the trade deadline, but I don't think they lost either. And first, we're going to go to my hometown Chicago Bulls. And I'm not saying that they're losers here just because I don't think they made enough moves to kind of classify them as a loser, but they also didn't make enough moves to kind of classify them as a team that made leaps and bounds and kind of just got better. They really just kind of got rid of guys that I wasn't super sure about, but they also got guys that I'm not sure about. They got Anthony Simons, who I think could be really good, and they got rid of Vooch, who I think was a really good move. But as everyone's been saying on social media, they don't have any centers or power forwards, really anything. They just made a trade for Nick Richards, who's a pretty average center. I'm just not really sure what they're doing, but they obviously collected a bunch of second-round picks, and they collected a good amount of talent. So I do think when it comes to the offseason, they have the guys and the talent that they can trade and kind of build this roster around. But for this year, I have no clue what the Bulls were doing. But looking in hindsight, this could definitely be a bad trade deadline for them because you're just getting a lot of guards. You're not getting a lot of things you need for a successful basketball team. So I'm just not sure what the Bulls were doing. And the other team that I'm going to throw in the middle of the pack is the Boston Celtics, who made that trade with the Bulls. I think getting Vucevic is definitely a interesting move. I think he does fit well with the players there, but I'm not sure that the Celtics necessarily needed this trade. I think keeping a guy like Anthony Simons gives you a microwave type of scorer off the bench, and I'm not sure that Nikola Vucevic gives you much of an upgrade over their current front court situation. I just think their centers are pretty average, and I think Vooch is going to be pretty average there. So I'm not sure that the Celtics needed to make this move, but I'm not going to call them losers just because I think they have a good roster around them, and I think Vooch can fit in well. But I think we'll just have to see how Vooch does play with this team. So right now we're going middle of the pack for the Boston Celtics. Now let's get into the losers, and I think you all know where I'm going with this first one. We're going to the Los Angeles Clippers, who honestly did get some points today for getting Benedict Mathurin and a few other pieces from the Indiana Pacers, but they had to give up Ivica Zubac, who I thought was a really good center and kind of someone that you could have built a roster kind of around him and one other star player like a Kawhi Leonard. But I'm not totally sure what the Clippers are doing. It seems like they're kind of going the rebuild route, but then you still have Kawhi Leonard on your roster. So I'm not really sure. And then they also are getting kind of first round picks from the Pacers that might be their pick, but it also could not be their pick if the kind of lottery odds fall their way or they don't fall their way. They obviously don't have their first round pick this year. That belongs to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I'm just not sure what the Clippers' direction is. I obviously didn't like the move for Garland and trading him for Harden because Garland isn't better. He's never going to be on Harden's level. And I just don't see the point in trading for a guy like Darius Garland. So for the Clippers, I just really have no idea the direction they're going, so they are definitely my biggest loser of the trade deadline. And we'll go to another biggest loser in the Dallas Mavericks, who just seem to continually lose over the last 2 years. Ever since that Luka Doncic trade, I feel like it's just gotten worse for Mavericks fans and the Mavericks organization as a whole. I don't understand trading Anthony Davis for the guys that you traded him for. I think you could have waited until the offseason and got way better offers for Anthony Davis. I just don't think the star player that you're getting back from Anthony Davis should be Chris Middleton, who I'm not even sure I can call a star player. So I just do not get this for the Dallas Mavericks. And you keep seeing the posts about here's what you got for Luka Doncic, and it's pretty much nothing. I mean, it's some decent picks, but just the level of talent that they had when they had Luka Doncic and they were in the NBA Finals to where they are sitting now has to be one of the biggest downfalls we've ever seen over a 2-year period. So definitely Dallas Mavericks are one of the biggest losers of this trade deadline. Then we'll go to one that didn't make any crazy moves, but they also kind of made moves in anticipation of getting a guy like a Giannis or a Ja Morant, but they didn't get those guys. They made moves to clear space. They made moves to kind of clear salary, but then they didn't do anything with it. They traded for Ayo Dosunmu from the Bulls, who I do like Ayo, but I don't know if they necessarily needed to make that move. And then they dropped Mike Conley for a bag of chips. Actually, no, less than a bag of chips. They got nothing for the Timberwolves for Mike Conley. So I just don't get what they did at this deadline when they didn't get any kind of big return back. So for that reason, I'm definitely going to go the Timberwolves are a loser of this trade deadline. Even though they didn't make any crazy moves, they just didn't make enough moves for me to be like, wow, they're contenders now. I think they're in the same place they were. They just had a little shakeup at the backup point guard and starting point guard position. And then we'll go to the Miami Heat, another team that didn't make any moves, actually. They made no moves, so they're kind of similar to the Timberwolves, and their moves were underwhelming, but the Miami Heat made 0 moves. They were in conversations for Giannis the entire time that we were saying, hey, Giannis might get moved, but he ended up not getting moved, and the Miami Heat made no other trades, didn't even try and trade anyone on their roster. So I just don't get what Miami's doing. They're definitely not contenders with that roster right now, and I think they needed to make a move for a guy like a Giannis or a guy like Ja Morant, and they didn't. They didn't make any moves. So the Timberwolves and Heat are pretty similar to me in the fact that they were in the conversations, but they didn't make any moves to kind of change their team or increase their chances of winning a championship. So for that reason, I'm going those two. Probably the third and fourth biggest losers, just because the Clippers and Mavericks are just abysmal right now and no one has any idea what they're doing. So in conclusion, I think this deadline was a pretty interesting one. Definitely a lot of rumors and kind of not a lot of movement that I expected. I definitely expected Giannis to get traded. He doesn't get traded. I expected Ja Morant to get traded. He didn't get traded. I didn't expect the Jaren Jackson Jr. or Harden moves, but I do actually like the fits for both of them in terms of teams that they got traded to. But this trade deadline kind of underwhelmed in terms of star power, because I definitely thought we were going to see those two guys that I mentioned in Giannis and Ja get traded. But, you know, there was the little moves that happened. Teams got a little bit better, or some teams got a lot worse. But overall, it was a fun deadline and a fun deadline to cover. And I think it's pretty open right now who might be the favorite in the championship odds. But I'll still go Thunder right now, just coming out of the deadline. Who's got the best roster? Who's got the best chance to win the championship? I'll still go with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But yeah, make sure to give me your thoughts on this trade deadline. If there were any moves that I didn't talk about that you thought were big, or maybe if you thought there were some moves that should have happened that you're really disappointed didn't happen. I know Mavericks fans and Heat fans and honestly a few franchise fans are probably pretty pissed off right now about this deadline. So definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you next video.